March 19, 2015, the Ochelli effect, as the rather epic bumper now tells you. Instead of all the chaos, just a little bit. Just a little bit. Anyway, want to thank you for tuning in to ucy.tv/TOE, or if you've decided on your fondle slab of choice to utilize something like a TuneIn app or whatever the hell else actually draws in the ucy.tv radio feed. Thank you for tuning in. I do appreciate it. All the people that have decided to go to the website and have joined in at the chat room, that is also appreciated. Anyway, I always like to do that right at the top of the show so I don't forget. Of course, if you're catching it further on down the line at YouTube or somewhere else, or if you decide to download it, trade it with your friends, or do something else equally strange to pick this up, thank you. Thank you very much. Anyway, tonight I have a recurring guest on my show. And I'm going to bring him in just a moment, as soon as I can get myself unstuck. Let me tell you something. I kind of isolated myself today. I did not want to look at the news. I did not want to look at anything today. I was in one of those kind of moods. So I'm going to apologize in advance for my attitude during this show. I have no desire to deal with the outside world, really. I have no desire to deal with myself, actually, but hey, let's trudge forward. Frank Gregory Ford has been on the show before. We have discussed various topics, things that he actually had intimate knowledge on. All right, like the concept of torture, like actually being part of the command that was at Abu Ghraib's, things like that. Yeah. And of course, the actual story behind the story relating to the, remember the weapons of mass destruction that nobody could find? The joke clips with Bush looking around trying to search under a podium and all that kind of good stuff. And it turns out, just like when we were talking about it on Tuesday and we were discussing Syria and exactly what the provenance of said weapons might have been in a place like Syria, where again, another Middle Eastern strongman is apparently using his weapons of mass destruction on his own people. Dear Lord, isn't that of the highest of interest?
While your party is reached.
We got to deal with the ringback tone. Sorry about that. We got to deal with the ringback tone because I had to actually call him myself this time. So this is the way it goes. The ringback tone blares through on the radio. Sorry.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. All right.
But No problem.
Yeah.
Back to what I was saying, though, when we were discussing Syria and we were talking about the way this game is played on the chessboard in the Middle East. Of
Mm-hmm.
course, we discussed the weapons of mass destruction, and everybody who decided to tune in because they saw the little post that I put out on social media sees that there's a picture of this man along with the phrase WMD whistleblower. There's a reason for that. We've covered it before, but I do believe it bears repeating. Why is it? Frank Gregory Ford is with me now. Why is it that I would say that you were a whistleblower relating to WMDs in Iraq exactly?
Well, let me see. Where do I start? Long story. Okay, I'll try to make it quick. All right. I was sent to Iraq as an intelligence operative to look for weapons mass destruction. All right, and that included nuclear, chemical, and biological in BC. So anyway, when I got there, and like I said, I'm going to make this short for your listeners. I just got through reading the Gettysburg Address, and the fellow who was supposed to speak before Abraham Lincoln at Gettysburg spoke for 3 hours and put everybody to sleep. So I'll try not to do that with your listeners, Chuck. Okay, but I got there, and fortunately, the first person I spoke to, who was an Iraqi, and I was just by accident, but I'm a pretty easily approachable kind of guy. That's what makes me a good intelligence operative. And it turned out to be the colonel who was in charge of the fighter bomber wing who dropped WMD chemical weapons on the Kurds and the Iranians. And the first thing he said was, hey, look, you jokers from America just invaded our country on the premise that we have weapons of mass destruction and we're hiding a bunch of terrorists. So here, you come and get them. I will take you to them tomorrow. He took me to WMD, weapons of mass destruction, chemical weapons, specifically VX/GF weapons, all right, manufactured and reconfigured in Fort Rucker, Alabama, stored in Pine Bluffs, Arkansas, and then shipped via the USS Wabash to the tender mercies of Saddam Hussein, who then deployed them within hours after shaking the hands of Dick Cheney. Hopefully that came through on the air, Chuck. Mm-hmm. Dick Cheney, all right, and then later with the Iranians, okay. I'm sorry, Dick Cheney, after Saddam Hussein shook his hand, within hours there were several 100,000 dead Kurds in the Anfal campaign. And then of course, to make a long story short, it was Donald Rumsfeld who shook the hand of Saddam Hussein, securing the deal for more weapons of mass destruction, chemical, again this time, dropped on the Shah al-Arab waterway that killed hundreds of thousands of Iranians. All right, mm-hmm. So those are American-made weapons of mass destruction, and as I've said to your listeners many times, now the bills of lading and transfer and shipment and manufacture were taped to the outside of each case. Okay, and this was in blood in the bunker where I found them, the 29 warheads that the Hans Blix inspection teams were looking for. All right, they were looking for those weapons specifically. And the bills of lading were there for the whole world to see who was responsible, and it turned out to be the Carlyle Group. The Carlyle Group Limited, all right, as in George H.W. Bush, Father H.W. Bush was responsible for these weapons. First of all, he was responsible for Carlyle being formed, the company of Carlyle, which its main purpose was to sell weapons to any regime that would have the cash or money to pay for them, which Hussein did, and then sell those weapons. It didn't matter what they are. It was George H.W. Bush who had the deciding vote with the Senate to either terminate chemical weapons from the face of the earth forever. He could have wiped those off the face of the earth, but instead he chose to use his vote as Vice President of the United States under Ronald Reagan to have those weapons, okay, secured, manufactured, and then used his personal company to sell those weapons to Saddam Hussein. So,
And
hopefully that's not a mouthful for the weapons of mass destruction folks out there.
no, it's okay, but here's the key point that I want to make sure we get across here. You're not saying this simply because you were told this by the pilot, okay, with the Iraqis, the guy who was in charge of that campaign. You're not telling us because of that. You're telling us that you know that these things were present in the country because you actually witnessed this for yourself.
Yes, as I said earlier, that I actually went into the bunker with this colonel. Went into the bunker with this Iraqi colonel, and he said, "Here are the weapons of mass destruction you sold us. Here they are. Get rid of them and get rid of yourselves. You get out of our country now that I've given you these. All right, these are your weapons of mass destruction. You sold them to us, and so as soon as you get rid of these things, get out of our country." So,
and meanwhile, what year was that?
That was 2003.
Yeah, 2003, and it doesn't seem as though we took them up on that offer of here they are and get out, does it?
Well, as they say, 1 million millionaires were made from Iraq alone. So, when the getting's good and everybody's dressed up to go to the party, okay, guess what they're going to do? All right. So, and that is exactly what happened. That was the greatest war profiteering scheme of all U.S. history. Right there was the country of Iraq. Mm-hmm. How many trillions of dollars? Forget billions. Forget millions. Money was at stake. Big money. In fact, I read something that the State Department doesn't want anybody to know about. The State Department lost, okay, $127 billion into Iraq that was unaccountable for, and surprise, it turns out that was more than twice the amount of money that we put into Japan and Germany to be rebuilt to modern countries and their industry. We rebuilt their industry. That was more than twice the amount we gave to Japan and Germany after World War II.
Well, right, and to go along with this, of course, and this is going to lead into something else, because, again, we were discussing Syria, and I try to explain that this is the same game being played on the grand chessboard, which is the Middle East at the moment. There was the discussion about detainees. There was the discussion about torture facilities. And you happen to know a lot about that. Before I brought you on the air, I explained that Abu Ghraib's, well, that happened to be your command.
Yes, it was. That was my command headquarters. Building 1A was my command headquarters. And I think you have a statement from General Janice Karpinski, all right, that she made for my court case. Yeah, I had the temerity, according to the government. I had the what's the word, the unpatriotic zeal to file charges against the command, my command at Abu Ghraib prison, because they were busy torturing people to death and into non-existence. And I believe you have the statement from General Janice Karpinski, who was the general in charge of all the prisons, including Abu Ghraib, including Camp Bucca. By the way, Camp Bucca and Abu Ghraib are back in the news again because, guess what? Most of the people that came out of that are in ISIS now, that are terrorizing the whole world, making the whole world shake. Okay, guess where they are graduate alumni from? Camp Bucca and Abu Ghraib. Their valedictorian, as you might imagine, is Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, my old recruited asset. All right. So guess what? We can thank America for ISIS. All right, because that was the training ground, was Camp Bucca, and And by the way, with my command provided all the interrogators and all the counterintelligence agents for both sides. All right.
Right.
So, and that command are the same defendants that are in General Janice Karpinski's statement that you're probably going to read in a little bit.
Right.
Right.
Actually, I'd like to get to it now because it's going to get into exactly why you filed the lawsuit and everything else. And here we go. And part of it's a little necessary legal support for the statement and all that. So bear with me, guys. Case number 34-2012-0012255. Okay. Which is the declaration of, well, under that case, is the declaration of Janice Lee Karpinski. Okay? Now, declaration of Janice L. Karpinski. I declare as follows. I am an adult resident of the state of New Jersey. If called to testify, I will testify. Okay, as follows. In June 2003, sorry, a little blur there for a moment, so I lost my place. In June 2003, I was serving as a brigadier general in the United States Army, deployed to Baghdad, Iraq, assigned as the commanding general of the 800th Military Police Brigade. There were approximately 3,400 soldiers assigned directly to my command, and I was in charge of 17 Iraqi prisons, aka detention facilities. The high-value detention facility, and then in brackets it says HVD, and Abu Ghraib prison. I was responsible for all prison operations in known facilities throughout Iraq. Okay. The Military Intelligence Brigade commander, Colonel Thomas Pappas, was responsible for conducting interrogations and interviews of prisoners and detainees as they arrived at Abu Ghraib's. Okay. Colonel Pappas was not officially in my direct chain of command, although he had a clear understanding of his reporting responsibilities to me concerning prisons, detention facilities, and detainees, and prisoners held in any of the prison facilities under my command. He provided reports to me on a regular basis. I was informed and believed counterintelligence E5 Frank G. Ford, which is you, hereafter named Ford, was an agent in the 223 Military Intelligence Battalion, 205th Military Intelligence Brigade, and became aware of the presence of weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, and incidents of torture and deaths of Iraqi prisoners being held at Abu Ghraib and under the control of the United States military and civilian personnel. All right. I further believe Ford, because again we're just shortened here, you're just shortened hereafter.
Right.
I further believe Ford reported the existence of WMD and the incidents of torture of prisoners and detainees at Abu Ghraib up through his chain of command. I also learned the defendants Artiga and Ryan intervened in Ford's attempts to report this information. Then concocted a medical diagnosis for a non-existent medical condition executed by Madeira. Ford was abducted under false pretenses, strapped to a gurney, drugged, falsely imprisoned, and flown covertly from Iraq without medevac orders and against his will. To Landshall, I believe that's how that's pronounced, military hospital in Germany.
Landstuhl.
Landstuhl, military hospital in Germany. These actions were in direct response to his reporting incidents of torture and abuse of prisoners and detainees held at Abu Ghraib, and reporting the existence of WMD, bearing United States manufacturing stamps and labels to his chain of command. Okay. Next paragraph. So this essentially verifies every single thing that we have talked about and your declaration that I've also read on this show prior. Okay, just for the listener's clarification. Anyway, going back to her statement. Colonel Pappas was not in my direct chain of command because specific chains of command were nebulous and subject to frequent changes. However, Pappas had a clear understanding of his reporting responsibilities to me in relation to prison operations, treatment of prisoners and detainees, and recommendations for release of prisoners and detainees when it was determined there was no further intelligence value. Okay. I declare with certainty Colonel Pappas never relayed Ford's information to me through any discussion or briefing. He never provided information concerning Ford's illegal and unauthorized removal from Iraq against his will. Although the soldiers assigned to Colonel Pappas command were not directly in my chain of command, they provided periodic updates relative to intelligence information and information compiled from interrogations and interviews. The information also included military personnel statistics and updates. However, there was never any information provided concerning Agent Ford's departure from Iraq. Colonel Pappas and the military intelligence soldiers were never provided any information concerning torture or abuse, and never relayed any information concerning Ford or his reports of torture and abuse at Abu Ghraib prison. If this information had been provided, I would have taken every step possible to stop this action being taken against Ford and investigated it fully. If the information concerning torture and abuses of prisoners and detainees at Abu Ghraib and or other secret facilities was provided by Colonel Pappas or any other member of the military, I would have taken immediate action and open investigations into these reports and allegations. I believe the information and reports were intentionally stopped and interrupted by defendants Artiga and Ryan and Pappas to prevent this critical information going up the chain of command. Artiga, Ryan, and Pappas individually and collectively failed in their responsibilities to forward critical information through the chain of command and provide this information to me. Okay, the foregoing information is this declaration is true in my own knowledge, and I believe the information and facts provided to me to be true. I declare under penalty of perjury under the laws of the state of California, the foregoing declaration is true and correct. And of course, it's executed the 23rd day of May 2012, and it's signed. Okay. Now, there is no question in General Karpinski's mind that she was absolutely kept in the dark regarding not only the report of weapons of mass destruction, the abuses of detainees, the torture of detainees, okay, but also your own personal abduction against your will and actual removal from Iraq by illegal means, essentially. In any sense of the word, there was nothing legal or proper about the way this was done. And although they were not directly in her chain of command, this should have been reported to her along with any of the allegations you made, along with any of the discoveries you made regarding weapons. All of this intelligence should have been provided to her, and she states that absolutely none of it ever was. Now, do I have a full understanding of this?
Yes, you do. And by the way, that is the first time this statement has been read. Okay, this declaration has been read on the air. Okay, to the world. And I might need to tell you this is that the U.S. Attorney's Office has done everything in its power to have that statement removed from this case. All right, that is a very extremely powerful statement. There's actually no ambivalence about that statement whatsoever. This is coming from the commanding officer, and the other implication, the very strong implication is that the command now, which are the defendants in my case, are busy trying to say that there's a couple of issues, okay, where they can claim that they were operating in my best interest, where they were abducting me, okay, and actually strapping me to a stretcher, shooting me full of mind-altering drugs, and torture. They call it torture, by the way. Okay, these were CIA illegal drugs, illegal interrogation drugs that were outlawed years ago because they fry people's brains. And I think that's really what they were intending to do, was scramble my brains enough to where I wouldn't sound, quote, credible. Okay. When you just read that statement means that the defendants in this case cannot use the doctrine of Ferries, okay, F-E-R-E-S, the Ferries doctrine, which basically says, oh yeah, if a commanding officer thinks that one of the members that they have is, what's the word, delusional, they're imagining somebody being tortured, and they're filing war crimes charges, gee, like I did. I was the medical officer treating a bunch of detainees who had been tortured, almost into non-existence. But surprise, when I filed charges and substantiated those charges with the medical records, okay, this is the response I got. I was strapped to a stretcher and abducted without orders. First time in U.S. history that has ever happened when an intelligence agent has been renditioned. And in fact, The Hague and Nuremberg are referring to my case as a super rendition, okay, and flown out of the country, all right? Tortured en route. Tortured, okay?
Well, let me ask you this question, because I want to illustrate this for the listener who might be thinking to themselves, well, what do you do, actually, if somebody, let's just say, snaps in a situation? Let's just say that there was a guy like you, not you, but there was, because I don't believe that you snapped. I don't believe that you were insane. I don't believe any of that. So we'll put that aside, but we'll imagine that there's another guy in your situation. Now, stop me if I'm wrong, but I think the proper procedure was supposed to be, you do detain him. You should have been detained if that allegation was being made by your command, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then they bring in people, or they remove you from the situation, not like they did, but carefully, gently, in fact. They remove you from the situation and have you examined. Okay? This is what they're supposed to do. And all of that stuff would have went up every single, if you're in such a critical, like, highly sensitive area, okay, and at the time, this was extremely classified stuff that was going on. Nobody was supposed to know about this outside of where you were. Okay? So, but either way, that stuff would have went up the chain of command. We have a guy here who's cracked, and here's what we did with him. Here's what happened. That never happened, did it?
Not hardly. In my case, it was, listen, and this is exactly how it came down. And by the way, you have the general's command declaration, okay? Doesn't matter what any of these jokers have said today. That statement that you just read for your listeners, and that hopefully it'll go around the world, okay? Because, and to show you the impact, like I said, the U.S. Attorney's Office has moved heaven and earth to have that statement covered up, to not be allowed in my court case, all right? They are moving heaven and earth now as we speak, trying to do exactly that, okay? But how these things normally are supposed to work when you have something as monstrous as war crimes happening that can actually taint the position of America in the global war, okay, of terrorism, a war on terrorism. The taint of torture ruins every legal premise that we have. So you cannot even have an accusation of torture being utilized in interrogation. You can't have that. You simply can't have it, because any type of confession taken or statement taken from a terrorist suspect or a detainee is automatically suspicious and thrown out, okay, because it was taken under great pain, okay, and agony and torture.
Mm-hmm.
So
but back to, hold on, because back to your situation, here's what I do know for sure, is that post-Vietnam, and not a lot of people know about this, but post-Vietnam, there was sort of an idea developed throughout the U.S. military, as far as I understood, that they would require someone outside of that command to come in, someone who is totally detached from the situation, to come in and assess the situation when an accusation like this is made. That didn't happen either, did it?
No, it was very interesting. Okay, Merle Madera, Dr. Merle Madera, Captain Merle Madera, had been in the military about 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks. Okay, she'd just basically been recruited off the street and stuck in uniform. Okay, and the irony is that she is in was it juvenile receiving and release in Riverside County now. Okay, now right now presently she is there. Okay, if she hasn't left the country concerning this case, she is still there. So what they're supposed to do is say, okay, all right, this person who was the sole medical officer supporting the detainees and U.S. military personnel alike. That was my job, is to provide medical care for both parties. All right. He has said, look, our interrogation teams, specifically the Samara interrogation team, is torturing people. They're lighting people on fire during interrogation is torture. Garroting people during interrogation is torture. All right, sticking burning cigarettes in somebody's ears is torture. Okay, and that was all in my medical records. Okay, very carefully documented on each victim, patient/victim, and so.
Right.
So
there's actually a horrendous list of things that you documented, some of which, I mean, just to be fully honest to the listener, some of which you're not even comfortable discussing at this point in time. Some of the things that you documented and witnessed and were put in the position of having to treat individuals in the aftermath of the interrogation. I mean, this is not something simple, and I try to make this point every time I have you on. This wasn't a matter of just putting bags over people's heads and putting them in naked piles, okay? This goes way, way past that, okay? So I'm sorry to interrupt you with that, but I wanted to make sure, again, to make that point. Go ahead.
So when I went in and I said, look, and I didn't even actually file charges, okay? Talk about hubris, okay, on this situation. Hubris and arrogance of the officer corps. The officer corps, okay, especially the intelligence corps, they have brought the worst war crimes in U.S. history to the present, okay, the present time. They have established these crimes as the worst war crimes ever committed by the U.S. fighting man, all right, and Indian intelligence services, because they absolutely refused to do what they were supposed to do. Okay, they thought it might reflect on their careers badly, and when I came along and said, look, we're doing these bad things, we're about to lose the city of Samara, okay, by the way, which should be in everybody's mind now concerning ISIS. That's where ISIS started, folks. That's where ISIS got its start, as in my recruited asset, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, all right? Mm-hmm. He was one of our victims, our torture victims, okay? But so anyway, I had the clear documentation on all victims, and I said, look, we can't be doing this. We've had a warning now from the city fathers, okay, in Samara, okay? All the sheikhs have said, if we continue doing this, we will be blown up, all right? They will attack us, and they're armed, and they're quite capable of doing exactly that, all right, destroying us. So if we continue torturing people. So I told that to the command, and let's face it, I was probably one of the oldest agents, and I was ready for retirement at the time, one of the oldest agents there. And I thought they were going to say, "Oh, hey, Doc, we better get on this thing right now. We better check it out. Hey, we're sorry. Thank you for doing what law requires you to do, as in reporting war crimes when you think they are happening. which is required by the Geneva Conventions of Law and Warfare. Okay. Oh no, much to my surprise, they didn't do anything like that. They said, okay, gee, that's all very nice. You have 30 seconds. You have 30 seconds to retract your charges, or you're going to go see the combat psych. And the combat psych at the time was Merle Madera. Okay, and obviously she didn't stand up and do what her job, and the responsibilities of her job dictated. No, she basically buckled and folded right then and there with a command. And so, but to make a long story short, they said, you got 30 seconds to withdraw your charges. I said, I'll save you the time and effort, of waiting. Okay, I'm not withdrawing anything. You have these people up there, they're doing bad things, they're doing war crimes on the Iraqi citizens of this country, and they're going to kill us for it, all right? They're going to drive us out, and they're going to kill us. It's just that simple. And they said, look, we don't care what you think. You've had your time. Now you're going to go see the psych by force. By force, okay? And, of course, that's when I went to see Merle Madera by force. And Captain Merle Madera was panic-stricken, and it went something like this. What did you see? I told her, and she said, okay, all right. How do you want to handle it? And I said, you better not, take the coward's route out on this thing, Dr. Madera. You better not give in, because if you do, this thing is going down as one of the history's great war crimes and war crime cover-ups. I stated that to her very clearly. And so she said, look, they're going to get rid of you one way or the other. Okay. They're probably going to put a bullet in your head, or we're going to try to get you out of here. I said, well, fine, whatever. But the thing is, I'm not withdrawing those war crimes charges, period. All right. Understand that right now, period. Okay. Excuse me. And so, anyway, Merle Madera went back to the command and said, okay, this guy he's solid, he's straightforward. If he says he saw war crimes happening, they are happening. And they said, that's not good enough, Captain Madera. You either get rid of him, okay, do whatever you have to do, as in draw up a phony medevac, okay, which, by the way, is against all regulations to do anything like that, where you allow a commanding officer to dictate what the medical treatment is going to be for a patient, okay, of a doctor.
I was just going to say that's like a direct violation, as far as I know. Okay, to explain this in simple terms for somebody listening, the doctors in the military are there to do a specific job. Even though they answer to commanding officers, okay, their specific area of expertise is not supposed to be dictated to them by people that are not part of the medical group, okay? Like, in other words, you can't have a guy say, a psychiatrist do an evaluation on a guy that says, look, this guy is done, he's no longer, fit for combat. And then a commander comes forth and says, well, I want you to say that he is. Okay, that can't happen. That's not supposed to happen, right? I mean, they can't countermand what a medical expert says regarding, even if you were injured, forget about the psychiatric section of things. Are you able to return to active duty? Because you took, let's just make something up, a gunshot in the arm. Are you able to return to active duty or not? If a doctor determines that you are not, they are not supposed. Their judgment is not supposed to be superseded even by a superior officer. Am I right?
Well, that is absolutely correct. If a doctor says a situation is such, that is it. There's no ambivalence about that order. Okay, if the doctor says this soldier is finished, he's going back, he's going home, that's the end of it. There's no debating it. All right.
Right.
And in this case, in front of eight witnesses in my court case, the commanders came in and said, you either get rid of him or we're going to get rid of you both. All right? and she buckled. She buckled. Now, I attribute a part of that to the fact that she had only been in the military for 3 weeks before she went to Iraq and didn't understand the full weight of responsibility of the position that she had. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I understand that. Okay. We were both doctors. I understood the pressure she was under. Okay. But I warned her. I gave her fair warning. All right. And then the rest is now history. Okay. I'm the only intelligence operative ever to be renditioned and tortured, okay, by our government, okay, and survive. That's the blue ribbon designation right there. It's probably happened before, but nobody survived, okay.
Yeah,
About it.
nobody lived to tell the tale, in other words, because, I mean, I am, and I say this to you, I've said this to you personally, off the air even, that I'm surprised that you were allowed to live, and even despite the fact, and of course you did a very smart thing, that put outside eyes on the situation, but I mean,
Right.
it would have been very easy to have you, killed by misadventure in some way or other,
Right.
or
Fratricide, they call it. Right.
you got it.
Mm-hmm.
They used to call that a long time ago in the military. I mean, I heard terms like, somebody being fragged. That was something that
Right.
happened. But of course, and there's of course the suspicions about people like Pat Tillman and stuff like that. I think that there's some validity to this stuff. And again, I think that the majority of these types of stories we don't get to hear. But the fact is that you actually did something really intelligent that again got that outsider's perspective and an outsider involved that kind of gave them a no way out sort of solution. If they would have delivered a dead body or disappeared you, they would have had bigger explanations to give. So, I wonder if you wouldn't mind touching on that really quickly.
Oh, sure. It'd be my pleasure. Yeah, okay. And I recommend this to anybody considering a career in intelligence. Okay, remember what I'm about to say here. First of all, I might have been born at night, but I wasn't born yesterday. And when I realized that this command was going to cover up these war crimes at all cost, all right, I had one of those officers tell me, he said, hey, look, he said, right or wrong, I don't care. You're not going to threaten my career. Okay? So that's how they were thinking. And so, my first opportunity, I contacted my counsel, my civilian counsel, who had been a former JAG lawyer, okay, an attorney in the military. And I got him on the phone, and it was a satellite phone, and I said, his name was Kevin Healy. Okay, and I said, Kevin Healy. I said, this is the humble Dr. Ford. I said, I'm sitting in Iraq right now, and guess what? Pack your bags. I want you on a plane over here. And he said, what's going on? I told him, and he said, oh my God. He said, this is earth-shaking, information, what you're telling me. And he said, that the United States government spent about 3 months before we went to war reassuring the world that we would not be torturing people and doing bad things like committing war crimes. All right, and if we did, we were not going to be subjected to the Geneva Conventions, the Geneva Convention Accords, to hold our people responsible. So here we had that situation, and he said, I will pack my bags. I'll be on the next plane to Baghdad, and the next thing I will do is I will contact General Stanley McChrystal, myself, and let him know that you are alive and breathing. As of this moment, you are alive and breathing, and you are not to come back in a body bag with a couple of bullets in the back of your head. Okay, a victim of what's called friendly fire or fratricide. All right, accidental discharge. They also call that. Okay, so I said, do that. Call General Stanley McChrystal, commander of the Southwest Asian Theater, and have him contact the command, because I don't expect to leave this facility. Okay, this was at Balad, actually, where this was happening, and I don't expect to leave this in a body bag. And he said, fine, consider it done. All right. And so he did that. I got confirmation of it about 20 minutes later that he had made the contact through the California National Guard headquarters and stated that he was traveling, okay, at their expense to Baghdad to make sure that I leave Iraq alive and breathing. So that was done. And Stanley McChrystal, okay, I mean, after my case, he probably decided that he wasn't going to have any more embarrassments like that. Hence, Pat Tillman. All right, okay, that's probably what got Pat Tillman, killed with 3 bullets to his head from 5 feet away. Was the fact that my case, okay, blew up into something earth-shaking and was threatening the entire command. All right, so anyway, that's the kind of insurance I bought when I had a permanent counsel, on retainer, is where I could pick up the phone and I could call him, and which I did. Like I say, I haven't made many really bright decisions in my life, but that was one of the smarter ones, I think. So anyway, and he did get on the plane, okay? Kevin Healy did get on the plane. He made it as far as Germany, okay? And then by that time, they had put me on a plane, but forcibly, by the way. 4 guys grabbed me, slammed me down onto a stretcher. And then, of all things, mysteriously, I was placed onto a plane where I was not listed on the manifest. Okay? You know what that means? Leaving on a U.S. military plane, leaving a war zone where you're not on the manifest, okay, it's unheard of. It doesn't happen, all right? And so anyway, that I thought, well, they're not going to try anything now. Well, far be it from me to, think something like that. Think that our own government employees would be following their own laws. That's what they have the U.S. Attorney's Office for, by the way, for your listeners, is to make sure that the U.S. government does not have to follow its own laws and can break its own laws when it deems convenient, all right? So that's what the U.S. Attorney's Office, who I'm battling, how I'm fighting on my case, okay, that's why they exist right there. So anyway, needless to say, next thing I know, okay, I'm on this plane without any reference to me being on the manifest. I didn't exist on that plane. Now, Merle Madera, Captain Madera, and another Captain Bowers, okay, who they administered this IV full of sodium, I believe it was now sodium amytal, okay, and interrogated me in a semi-closed position and situation, okay, and I believe they asked me when I was almost brain dead, asked me who I'd contacted concerning the torture issue and the interrogation issue.
Well, let's back one thing up. Let's back one thing up, because in reality, you don't actually know all of what they put into your system through that IV, do you?
Oh, of course not. No. I mean, they don't. When somebody's torturing you and renditioning you illegally, they don't sit there and hold a kind of a pen pal conversation with you. Well, gee, what do you think? Well, should we try this, doctor? Okay, no. They'll hold your arm down and stick a needle in you, and fill you full of the most outlawed drugs at the Nuremberg Accords that you can imagine. Okay, that will flow into your system, and it's not like the movies either. Everybody thinks, oh, well, you can feel yourself getting fuzzy, your vision gets fuzzy. No, it's not like that.
Well, I was actually going to ask you about that. I was going to ask you exactly from your first-person perspective what that experience was like, because, you were given things that were definitely meant to, I hate to even say this, like, how do you put this? It's meant to, render the subject okay, a whole lot more pliable. All right. It's meant to lower inhibitions. It's meant to, you know that these kind of things were introduced into your system. You're sure that those were the types of things because you could feel something happening. But how did that actually feel? I mean, how did that kick in? Because yeah, you're right. Most of us will never experience that kind of thing, to where you're being, drugged for, for the purposes of interrogation. So the idea that you experienced this, I wonder if you could sort of give people an idea of what that was like. I mean, besides the
Well,
fact that you're already, probably kind of stunned that you're in this position to begin with, you're probably pretty angry. Okay, I would be.
mm-hmm,
That's for damn
mm-hmm.
sure. Uh,
Seething is more the word, Chuck. Seething
Seething.
with
Okay.
fury. Okay, right.
Infuriated, disgusted, upset, and then they stick you full of
Enraged.
this stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
what actually started to happen? I mean, did you immediately feel like ill? Did you feel dizzy? Were you sleepy? I mean, what came over you exactly? And then
Okay.
what were your memories of what happened after that?
Well, like I say, it's very seldom do you have a victim who is like myself, well informed of medical practices, and an intelligence operative too. Okay, it took me years to become an intelligence operative and a doctor. All right, so it wasn't like I was a what's the word, untrained observer. No, while this was going on. No, I understood the whole premise about why I was being renditioned. Okay, this is and this is the same thing that happened, by the way, to Soviet agents. Okay, Soviet agents who had been caught spying. This is what happened to them: is they were strapped to stretchers and shot full of drugs, tortured usually on the stretcher, and then, for good measure, okay, when all the information had been extracted out of them, out of these agents, this is the Soviets, they were fed alive into a furnace, a blast furnace. All right, they were fed alive, screaming, and yelling. Okay, and wired to a stretcher into a blast furnace. So this is what I had in the back of my mind. Okay, was I fully expected when I saw that needle, and the fluid go into my arm, I didn't expect to wake up. Okay, and I can say that with all reassurance. I expected the back ramp of that plane to be dropped, and four people take me out, just walk me out on the back ramp, and then throw me out the back somewhere over the Red Sea or over the Mediterranean even. Okay, that's what I expected when I saw that fluid, that clear fluid going into my arm.
Mm.
So that's was the last thought that I had, was I'm not expecting to wake up from this.
The last fully coherent thought you had at that time, anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Right. And it's quite often one doesn't get a chance to ask a victim. Okay, because in these situations, that's what usually happens. Is they just get walked right out the back of the plane, out the ramp, and get thrown out over the Red Sea. Okay, and they're never seen again, of course. So that's what I expected, really. I'm a bit of a realist, like when this situation happens, although I never thought it would happen to me, okay, especially for obeying the law, okay, and standing up and doing what I thought was right, okay, trying to stop war crimes from happening. I didn't ever think it would happen to me. But, needless to say, when the only way I knew I was alive was I felt myself blink. Okay? And I came to, and it was, I think, like I said, I'm guessing now a lot of this stuff. I'm guessing. I don't really know exactly, because I'm just some poor slob strapped to a stretcher. Okay? And so, but I was all alone, and so I thought, okay, I've had enough of this, these antics. All right, the two psychiatrists were not there. Okay, and by the way, this process is something that was developed in a program, and you should get a lot of listeners now calling in for affirmation. This program with these drugs were developed for interrogating Soviet spies, okay, and it was developed under a program called MK Ultra. All right, does that ring any bells with your listeners? MK Ultra.
Mm.
And like I said, part of the problem was the drugs were so powerful that it was literally frying the brains of people that were victims of their use. And so,
right.
anyway,
You can look up a guy named Nochi Parenko who went through an entire battery of this type of stuff. Post JFK assassination, was a Soviet agent who defected, and later on was allowed to live under an assumed name in the United States and got apologies finally in recent years. But this guy endured exactly this kind of treatment. And here's another case where a guy lived, by the way. Of course, this stuff was all developed by the psych warfare and the MK Ultra type programs. Not only MK Ultra, but there was a couple others that were sort of associated with it that you can find. And if you look into this kind of stuff, the truth serum that they used to talk about in the James Bond films and so on and so forth, this stuff is actually reality. There was plenty of plenty of different drugs. There's a lightweight something called sodium pentothal, which was available in the 60s and 70s to law enforcement, believe it or not. And then there's of course all these other ones like the sodium amytal. But there's actually worse things that I still think we don't have a firm name of what they are, that have been used and are actually extremely destructive to the brain, cause serious permanent damage. But again, in the case where you're looking to interrogate somebody before you're going to disappear them, it's really kind of irrelevant what the long-term effects are. So, this is just meant to extract the information on the spot and to make the subject extremely susceptible to revealing anything that might possibly be deposited in their memory. That's what the idea is, and of course, like I said, the long-term effects are really irrelevant. And look up Nochi Parenko if you can figure out how to spell that one. I can't remember how to spell it off the top of my head, but you'll find it. And he was associated to that, and he's only one example of exactly what you're talking about. So I'm sorry, but go right ahead.
Okay. Well, like I say, quite often you just don't get a living victim. Okay, when this is done, most of the time their brains are gone. Okay. Anybody that was given this treatment in the Soviet Union, like I said, either they were fed into a blast furnace alive, or they were put into what was called the Serbsky Institute. All right, that's Serbsky, and the Serbsky Institute made sure, this is in Russia, okay, made sure that your brains were never in any kind of condition ever to recall or recount any type of event for legal purposes ever again. In other words, a carrot or a turnip looked like it had more brains than you did after this treatment was administered.
Right, wiping your personality and your entire memory, as it were, through things like electroconvulsive shock, and various other conditioning, traumatic. There's all sorts of traumatic treatments that can be sort of delivered to a subject in order to pretty much wipe their personality. I mean, literally, the concept of brainwashing that people very casually throw around is a reality that the intelligence agencies have had in their hands for some time. So, yeah, absolutely.
There are severe laws, very strong laws, preventing this. Okay, but when you have a government that feels that it can create its own agency to let it break its own laws at convenience, okay, at a whim, all right, which the U.S. government has. It's called the U.S. Attorney's Office. And when they have such luminaries as Alberto Gonzalez running it, okay, you can imagine, okay, what type of crimes our government has committed against its own citizens, at will whenever it wants. Mm-hmm. Ben Wagner now, okay, he has my case, and he's very, very proud of himself, okay. Ben Wagner will state many, many times that the goal that the U.S. Attorney's Office has is to make sure that no case, no matter how strong it is, ever goes into a courtroom. Okay? Because what would happen if you had 12 reasonably intelligent people listening to my story? What would happen? Okay? I guarantee, I think everybody knows what would happen. All right? But their sole purpose is to make sure that the government can break its own laws with impunity at convenience whenever it wants, all right, and not be held accountable. So,
you know what occurs to me too. You know what occurs to me too is and I know I've never even bothered to broach this with you before. It has occurred to me in the past, but I was thinking about this just now. You know, if they try to discredit your accounts, okay, and even with the support of Karpinski, you know, and her declaration and everything else, and the other supports, if they try and sort of discredit your accounts of being renditioned and the treatment you received, tell me something. Isn't there a way that one can determine either by spinal tap or by other means that certain things were actually introduced into your system that would be directly traceable to this kind of treatment? Like, you know, the interrogation drugs, I mean, they can find, if they do a spinal tap on you, they can literally tell you if the right tests are run. Every single drug that's been introduced into your system, you know, like for 25 years or something like that, I think. I mean, again, I'm not a doctor, but I'm aware that this is a possibility. Couldn't evidence like that be introduced also to to support your story as well?
Well, listening to your description of that type of medication, is there anybody in their right minds that would want to have medication put into your system that can be still, discovered and analyzed 25 years later? I know I don't. Well, I think I'd rather stick with naturopathic medicine, to be quite honest.
Well, no, certainly, but the thing is that by the fact that they could prove its existence in your system, and you certainly wouldn't introduce it to yourself, you know, it's not like this is a party drug, okay?
No.
Wouldn't that be proof positive of your statement about what happened to you, even though you don't necessarily, and they might even be able to determine exactly what chemicals were introduced into your system, wouldn't they?
Oh, sure, yes. Within reason, I don't know. I mean, it's like saying, well, geez, did anybody ever give you a hypno? Okay, yes, initially, they can check for the amine groups. That's the basis of these drugs, but probably after a while, it does dissipate out of your system, and especially with my case, that's been what is that now? 11, 12 years now that this happened. So I don't really know, Chuck, but all I know is that yes, when I filed charges and actually got this up, before the investigators and like the inspector general, I said yes, by all means, let's take some medullary response evaluations for because of course the defendants immediately start calling me a liar and saying I imagined the whole thing. Okay, in spite of the fact that the greatest war crime scandal and investigations have happened, completely supporting my case in every way. Okay, but I said, hey, let's go ahead and take a medullary response test. Okay, to find out who's lying and who's not. And by all means, you want to take a blood test? I offered. Oh no, boy, they couldn't backpedal fast enough. Okay. And so that's one hazard when you rendition a doctor, okay, who knows what's going on. That's a real hazard for these people. So, and they never anticipated these kind of problems with my case. So, by the way, there's a fellow now. You can actually look him up. Your listeners can look him up. He is just like me. Okay, he put together the army that actually overthrew Muammar Gaddafi recently. Okay, that's recent history. Abdel Belhaj. Okay, I have to think about these things because of all these mind-altering drugs that MK Ultra gave me. Okay, but Abdel Belhaj, his case is presently in the courts. He was the CIA intelligence operative who put together the army, led the army, overthrew Muammar Gaddafi, and then the agency was so grateful that he turned right around, and this might sound like deja vu to your listeners. They strapped him to a stretcher, okay, renditioned him, tortured him, and for good measure, they brought his family in and renditioned and tortured them, okay, for good measure, okay. And now, okay, Mr. Belhaj is coming out of hiding, and his story is becoming, well known, okay, through our media. That's the internet media, of course. But his case is going up before the courts like mine. So obviously, this is not unusual behavior. And if one thinks that the intelligence services learn their lesson, okay, when they commit something like this, when they commit war crimes and so forth, no, they don't. They just take great annoyance, okay, at having somebody like Senator Feinstein launch a 5-year investigation, which reveals the fact. By the way, that was based on my statements to her, okay, that this was going on. That's why she launched her investigation, and everybody knows what the results of her investigations were. Quote, horrific. All right, gee, Senator Feinstein, gee, imagine that. What I told you 10 years ago, now you're finally coming out with a statement saying that they were horrific. Okay, well, surprise, and that was on the heels of the White House investigation into these crimes. Okay, into these crimes. Okay, so no, these folks have never challenged my veracity on my stories. No, they have not. Okay, because first of all, everything is well recorded, and fortunately, my researchers who have supported me immensely have come up with the entire documentation sequence, okay, of what happened to me and my history, because my history disappeared immediately. I think we've told your listeners that. My 30 years disappeared overnight, okay.
Well, and I've tried to point out that they actually do this in a lot of situations where something sensitive could be revealed. They'll actually just disappear somebody's service record. People think that that's not a possibility in the electronic age, but believe it, it still happens. And you and I had a discussion about this. I mean, we talked in detail about it off the air. Even I know personally for a situation I'm involved in, military records will simply vanish down the hole, as it were. I don't know exactly where they go because I've never been able to rediscover them. You were lucky enough to pull them back up somehow.
Yes.
Before I go any further, I want to say this. In the next couple of minutes, if you guys want to join in and ask questions, please do. 718-717-8296. I'd be more than happy to entertain any questions for the guest. And also, if you're on my Skype list, you can. I'll just add you in, okay? And if you're not on my Skype list and you want to be, it's charles.ochelli. That simple. And I'll add you directly into the call. No screener, no nothing. Just try and ask an intelligent question. One question is on the Skype via text right now. I really wish you would call in, just so you know. I don't want to keep taking the text ones because they make me crazy. But anyway, one question here, because apparently they've been reading up on you a little bit, and I knew this was going to come up eventually. See, and I know how to answer this, but I'm going to let you deal with it. I read on the internet that Mr. Ford claimed to be a Navy SEAL, and then it was found out that he is not a Navy SEAL. What does he have to say about that? I actually know the answer to this question, but I think I'll let you address that because I know where that came from and everything.
Mm-hmm. Right. No, there's a group, okay, it's called the CIA, okay, and it's not the Cocaine Importation Agency. It's not the Culinary Institute of America. What they do, this is a Central Intelligence Agency, is they have a group, and in this case, it's a group that does damage control. All right. When I filed my charges, almost immediately my records just disappeared. Okay. This is back. Let me see. We're almost talking 30 years ago now. That yes, I was assigned as a corpsman to support the Navy SEALs. All right. The Navy SEALs. All right. Okay. I was a corpsman, and I've got got pictures. I have my evaluations now that seem to disappear. Okay, but I've got them all back. I've got my orders to the Navy SEALs. Okay, so surprise! This group that put this all together was by somebody mysteriously named Larry Johnson. All right, Larry Johnson. If you pull his bio, okay, funny thing, he is from the quote State Department and the Central Intelligence Agency. Okay, always remember, the agency can smear you wherever you are, no matter what you've done. Okay, I mean they were the ones that came up with a birth certificate. Okay, for a president that surprise. Okay, they had him born in a hospital that didn't exist, in a country that didn't exist. Okay, so you think they would have done a better job than that, and then to turn right around with me saying something like this is that the former director of the Central Intelligence Agency, George H.W. Bush, was responsible for manufacturing weapons of mass destruction and using his Central Intelligence Agency connections to ship those weapons of mass destruction to the Hussein regime. What kind of response do you think the agency would do, and what lengths do you think the agency would go to smear me over something that happened on an assignment that was a normal assignment for me 30 years ago? Okay, so there was an investigative journalist who investigated Larry Johnson and this mysterious group called Veriseal, and surprise what he found out. He found out that it doesn't really exist. It has a P.O. box in a back alley in McLean, Virginia, okay? And that's all you can really find out about this group, okay? So I was basically swift-boated, okay?
Right, and the reality is that you never claimed to be a Navy SEAL. You were actually a corpsman in support of SEALs because they didn't act. SEALs don't have doctors. Okay, let's just put it that way. They don't have doctors. So just in that capacity, I'm not even saying that was the capacity you were in, but it's not that you claimed that you were a Navy SEAL. It's that you are in support of them, and various military, attachments end up in support of various units during various operations. You can find people intermingled in all sorts of ways, and because you were an intelligence operative, a military intelligence operative, there's all sorts of different groups and different, sections of the military that you were involved with during all sorts of different operations. So that was an attempt to kind of smear you as a liar. That's what happened there. And I'm surprised it hasn't come up before now, because I knew it would. It's one of the things that does come up when you do a Google search about you. And and just for my 2 cents, it's completely fictitious. It's made up to pretty much marginalize the information that you're putting out, and meant to discredit you in general in the public mind, so that people don't take you seriously. That is what the intention of it is, point blank. Sorry, go ahead.
It doesn't matter if you're the Dalai Lama or Mother Teresa. They will smear you. Okay, if you threaten them in any way, shape, or fashion, they will smear you. Okay, you can count on it. But one good thing about that, and I can say this to your listeners with all the comfort in the world, is that is listed as slanderous and libel. And if you look at Google, they do have a disqualifier that says this is slanderous and libel information. Okay, I spoke to Sergey Brin, and I said, who do you think you are putting that about me? Okay. And he pulled it up. Sergey Brin is one of the founders of Google. And he immediately put that designator is that it was listed as libelous and slanderous. Okay. But the reason why I want that there, now I can have it removed. And I haven't had it removed. You can actually request that as per court order. You can have that removed, that information, that type of slanderous information taken off. But the thing is I want it left on there because that is damages. Okay, that is damages when my case goes to court. That is damages. Okay. Now, my attorney, took that same information, by the way, which your listener is looking at, and he turned right around and he notified, the U.S. Attorney's Office saying that, if that's the case, if he is not what he says he is, why do we have an extended archive of his service with the Navy SEALs, to include the Navy SEAL leapfrogs? Okay, I was the corpsman for them for a while. Okay, several operations. Why do we have all these documented bits of service record that are archived? Which, of course, the government forgot to pull those. Okay, and the agency forgot to scrub those. Right. So we have those available. Okay, and so anyway, but that is listed as damages, and I'm going to demand from the government extensive financial monetary damages because they put that intentionally trying to discredit me. They put that out there. So I hope that answers your caller's question.
Right. It's one of those text Skype things, and as I said before, I would prefer if you guys dropped in verbally and asked the question yourselves. I really would. Yeah, but I'll take them, for now, because again, 718-717-8296. If the phones are working, get through to me, and I will put you on and let you ask whatever you want. It's that simple. I definitely want to hear what it is that what it is we've missed here, or what it is that you'd like to know about this, because I have had you on several times. We've discussed various things, not only your own experiences, but of course the court case that is ongoing, which is under appeal at the moment, which I don't even want to comment because I'm not a legal expert, but I mean, my feeling about what they've tried to pull with your court case is really funny. I think they want it to go away pretty badly. And and they're trying a lot of different maneuvering. At the end of the day, I'm not exactly sure what you're going to accomplish with it, but the fact that it's getting out on the record, and and the fact that there is so much documentation. This isn't somebody who's making up a story wholesale, who was telling you guys, things that he did not see, things he wasn't involved in, and is, very much like there are a lot of people out there, and I won't name names directly, but there's a lot of people that claim to be involved in situations that simply were not. There are thousands of pages, actually, that verify, thousands of pages of official documents that verify a lot of the story here. Some things by virtue of the fact that they were hidden, by virtue of the fact that they weren't sent up the proper chain of command, don't exist as they should. But we've outlined that, haven't we? We've told you that, General Karpinski was supposed to be informed. So all of the steps involved in the information and the reports having been relayed to her, as was part of her responsibility for being, for being in command of all of the facilities, all of the prison facilities in Iraq at the time, which we outlined earlier in the show, if you caught it, when I read the direct declaration from the general herself. Okay, if all of those things had done, there'd be an even greater blizzard of paperwork that would be available regarding this situation, but it wasn't done. They wanted to try and disappear exactly what you're talking about. They wanted to try and disappear your story, and they certainly didn't want to admit culpability when it came down to trying to silence you, because let's separate the issues here. First of all, we're talking about the war crime situation, the fact that you were attempting to report it, as was your duty, by the way. Okay, this was something that, anybody who was there should have been doing. But of course, you drew the straw of conscience and tried to do it. and this is how you were treated in response. The way that they handled you, the fact that they renditioned you, and I still hate that euphemism, they abducted you, okay, and against your will administered drugs to you, took you to places where it was completely not with your consent, okay? So your body was violated, the general chain of command was violated, the code of military justice was violated, the simple moral principle and all of those wonderful Geneva Conventions against torture were being violated, and the cover-up is also a crime, by the way, was also being violated. The proper way of handling the situation was being violated. All of these things are being violated here. And then on top of it, we have the direct, the direct confirmation of the fact that we were being lied to in the public about the presence of weapons of mass destruction, what the provenance of those things were. So many other criminal acts now attached to that, and you're a witness to that as well. This is why I say I'm surprised that they allowed him to live, because I got that question in the Skype too. Why are you saying you're surprised that they allowed him to live? Because think about all of the things that can be revealed just from this one man's testimony here, okay? And meanwhile, I also wonder, how many other people are coming to your coming to your support here. Is anybody else supporting you outside of the general, at this time that was part of the original situation?
Originally, my good close friends and so forth, they were all running like quail, scattering like quail. Okay, because one of the things that happened was immediately the command, which was the command, and Building 1A, along with the CIA, same building, they said, anybody coming to my support, anybody offering any kind of supporting testimony, would lose their security clearance. Okay? Right. Now, they threatened me with that, by the way, having my security clearance pulled. And, of course, my response was, so, in other words, if I don't speak up, if I keep this quiet about war crimes, I get to keep my security clearance? Is that what you're saying? And of course, they do the bureaucratic two-step and try to dodge that. But next thing you know, when I filed charges, that was the first thing they did, was pulled my security clearance. All right, and they suspended it. It takes an act of Congress to actually pull it, but they can suspend it. All right, it's kind of a semantical thing. So anyway, so here we are. Years later, and all of a sudden, everybody's coming to my side. Offering help and assistance, saying, "Oh well, we really believed in you all along. We just were being threatened all along," and which I can believe that for the most part. Senator Feinstein, John McCain. I went to all those people. Barbara Boxer. I went to every single. Nancy Pelosi. You remember, Miss Plastic Surgery, Nancy Pelosi, Senator Pelosi. I went to her. Very clear evidence that this was going on, and they all this kind of, well, gosh, we'll have to take a long, hard look at this, and of course, except for Senator Feinstein, I never heard from any of them again. I do have their letters. They said, "Oh yes, we'll take a long, hard look," but that was it. That was it. And then it started coming out that yes, there were weapons of mass destruction, as the Central Intelligence Agency said, 2 weeks ago, Chuck? They came out and said, yes, there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq and now Syria, and yes, we have been buying those weapons back. Funny thing, they were sold by private parties using American government technology to produce those. They were sold to Saddam Hussein for millions and millions of dollars. And then the agency has been using U.S. taxpayer dollars to buy those same weapons back okay, which weren't supposed to exist in the first place.
Well,
Okay, this is what I'm dealing with every day.
well,
Okay,
right, and here's the thing: as this unfolds, and I want to make this clear to the listeners that you may not understand this, because it seems like all of this stuff comes out all at once when I'm talking to you, but the fact is that since your first appearance on this show, a whole lot of the stuff, a whole lot of the claims that you have made have been verified in one way or another. The Al Baghdadi story. I read to you an
mm-hmm.
article the one time when you were on with me about how they were revealing that this guy was in, our prison facilities. And meanwhile,
Mm-hmm.
you had told us that, a month, 2 months before the
Right.
the written media decided to get on it and tell you the very same thing. Of course, they're not saying that he was an intelligence operative for us. They haven't gotten that far yet, and who knows if they
Mm-hmm.
ever will, because he was actually an asset. Let me correct myself. He wasn't an operative. He was an asset
Right,
uh,
recruited asset.
who
Right.
was under control, or control, and you put that in quotes because it doesn't necessarily mean that he was a robot under somebody's absolute control, but under the control, as it were, in an intelligence sense, of an intelligence operative who was in Iraq, namely yourself. All right,
Mm-hmm.
and you talked about that. Simply because, well, gee, I recognize that name, and this is the leader of ISIS, the big boogeyman once again. But the mainstream didn't even have that out there until after we had already discussed it. Okay, that's one thing. The next thing is the CIA is saying we're buying back weapons. Well, gee, buying weapons would be one thing, but if you're buying back weapons, it sounds to me as though there must have been a transaction to, if they're coming back to you, then that means they're being returned to you. Notice that little,
Mm-hmm.
little piece of the language that's just left out there
Some more
floating.
semantics, some more government semantics. I'm so tired of government semantics. There's no such thing as yes or no with these people.
Right.
All right. So, by the way, Mr. Baghdadi was largely responsible for returning the poor soldier who had virtually had her entire command wiped out. Was Jessica Lynch, and that's a very, very, what's the word, empathetic story of her. But I, as I told your listeners, and this will probably come out. Okay, it'll probably come out for sure in my book, which is hot and heavy now in production. But Jessica Lynch, of course, everybody's frantic to find Jessica Lynch. Okay, we knew she was out there. We knew that the Iraqis had her, and it was Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi who said, "Yes, we have her," and with a smirk on his face and a sneer, he said, "Yes, and we're going to keep her, and we're going to show her a good time." All right, and that's when I said, and I'll say this to your listeners, it's one of the few times that I've actually demonstrated some real sadistic pleasure. Okay. And I can say this now, all right, is I looked him right in the eye and I said, through a translator, of course, okay, he doesn't speak any English at all.
Mm-hmm.
I said, Mr. al-Baghdadi, all right, you listen to this very clearly, is that these are Shia policemen who picked you up. And I'm going to, when we get her back, I'm going to find out what was done to her. And I'm going to have these men right here, do everything that you could have stopped from happening to her. I'm going to have happen to you, okay? And with great satisfaction, I saw the blood drain out of his face as it was being translated to him in those terms. And that's when he immediately said, "Oh yes, here's where you can find her." Which still took 3 days to get the bureaucracy, of warfare and our U.S. Army going to find her. It took about 3 days, okay, but we finally did find her, okay, which was immensely satisfying to me. All right, when there are good outcomes for a story like that, that's immensely satisfying, okay, and that's all I ever wanted. The last assignment in Iraq, that's all I wanted was us to, if there were weapons of mass destruction, let's get them, get out of here, okay? Okay, there was nothing to be gained by garrisoning a country that doesn't want you there, all right? Mm-hmm. Just ask Napoleon, okay? The history books were replete with issues of invading a country that didn't want to be invaded, and all the terrible things that happened to the troops that have to deal with the garrisoning process, okay?
Right.
They just get slaughtered. They get slaughtered, okay? And I saw that coming, and I sent reports, very clear reports and concise reports that this is what was going to happen, and that is basically what happened in Iraq, okay? I wasn't, like I said, I was born tonight, but I wasn't born yesterday, and my reports reflect that. So.
Right. You were born at night, but not last night. Here's the thing, and here's another little piece to the whole idea about your court case. They can't claim that there was a total breakdown in the chain of command based on that Lynch story, because here's the deal. There had to have been, your report had to have reached the proper channels in order to get an operation going, in order to get an extraction team together to go get her. Right? Mm-hmm. So that involves a whole lot of dissemination of basic information. I mean, look, I don't necessarily know how the whole house works, but I got a little bit of an idea of what the blueprints might look like, okay? The thing is that that's absolute proof that the command structure was not completely inept. That's absolute proof that reports could have been arriving into all sorts of hands where they needed to go, and that they directly and willfully you made sure that your reports and your information was not being channeled correctly through the chain of command, through the appropriate channels, whatever they call that nowadays. That's absolute proof that it wasn't merely a matter of a breakdown in the system or communication or anything like that, because there is a prime example of where information that you obtained, information that you were directly privy to, had gone through the proper channels and had caused a reaction. Now, people say a lot of different things about the Jessica Lynch thing. Do I think it's been dressed up extensively for Hollywood? Yes, I do. I think that the mainstream media, as usual, dressed it up the way they wanted to. Okay, and there's a whole lot more to that story, probably. Not saying that you have hands on all that information, but what I'm saying is that there is absolute proof that when you were doing your work, when you were interacting with people, and when you were gathering intelligence, which is one of the main functions of what your command was doing, okay, guess what? There's proof that it was working. So you can't say that it was a complete communication breakdown. You can't say that all channels had broken down. You can't say that this was some sort of a benign failure in any way, shape, or form. This is a willful, intentional failure to report the things that you were trying to get out there. And I think that that can't be emphasized enough, because as the general said in her declaration, if she had known this information, she would have immediately taken action. Now, what action that involves, she spoke very generally about it. But, of course, how could she do anything but, because now we're discussing a hypothetical. If we were talking about what she did do or what action she had taken, there would have been a great many more specifics to it, more than likely. But because, but we know that at least action would have been taken. That's what I take away from her declaration. And I'm sure that you feel the same way about that. And I wanted to point that out as well.
One of the issues here is, and I need to get this out, because just last night I watched on Frontline, PBS, Public Broadcasting System, the show on ISIS, how it was founded, who founded it, and so forth. And of course, they had al-Baghdadi there. Now he looks like an old man, but when I first set eyes on him there at the Samara police station. Okay, he just had a mustache, the Hussein look, and he looked much younger. He's 45 now. But back then, of course, he was in early 30s. Okay, but the thing is, and I can't quite figure this out. Okay, is nobody is making the connection with al-Baghdadi, is where he's getting his information from. Okay. His information is diamond-edged sharp. Okay? He knows exactly who does what, when they do it, where they do it. Okay? And I can't believe we're still floundering about trying to figure out ISIS. It's real simple for your listeners, people. Okay? He headed up, along with Colonel Mahmoud, boy, talk about a rascal and an operator. He and Colonel Mahmoud headed up Mukhabarat, okay? Mukhabarat. It is the intelligence service, the counterintelligence service of Saddam Hussein, all right? Very well built, very well structured. They had the latest and greatest databases and storage units. They knew exactly all there was to know in the Middle East for 35 years, and they have analyzed at great length what Americans have done, how we do it, what type of equipment we have, how we implement that equipment in a war zone. Okay, they know how we communicate, everything there is to know. They know our command structures. It is in the Mukhabarat database. Okay, I've done that. I've done this on your show before. Telling people that the message is not getting out. That's why ISIS is so effective. We can't defeat ISIS now. Okay, we were virtually thrown out of Iraq, by a bunch of kids running around with AK-47s and sandals. Okay, because they weren't they weren't making the same mistakes that we make. All right, but here we are about to make the same mistakes again, and I'm a little irritated. And I'll tell your listeners, if you don't mind me putting this out. Okay.
No, go ahead.
Is that back in October I gave a briefing to some Air Force intel officer types in Advanced Air Force Base in Oklahoma. Okay, just outside of Enid. Okay, and all I got was the smirks and the poo-poos. Oh, yeah, we know all about this. Oh, yeah, we know you're a really smart guy. Ha, ha, laugh, laugh. But we don't see anything that can challenge us. I said, guess what? This group knows all there is to know about the U.S. Air Force because they have been getting downloads, database downloads from Soviet intelligence for years, at least 4 decades. The Soviet intelligence system has been briefing these people twice a week on all aspects of U.S. military operations, including air operations. And surprise, what starts happening? The new, and nobody wants to talk about where these new surface-to-air systems are showing up in the hands of ISIS and downing and bringing down state-of-the-art U.S. planes. All right. That poor pilot who was burned alive. Guess what he was flying when he was shot down? He was flying an F-16, American-made. What is it? McDonnell Douglas F-16. He was flying an F-16 when he was bagged and brought down. Okay, to meet his end in that cage. A fiery end. And then how? There were 21 pilots, Syrian pilots, that had their heads cut off on the internet, sawn off on the internet. All of a sudden, pilots are showing up in ISIS videos. Why is that? Because they're being shot down. It's about time we started understanding who we are dealing with ISIS. Okay, these people already know all there is to know about how we do business in the Middle East. They are fanatic, they are tough, and their intelligence base is next to none, and they have no limits on their money, from funding. They can afford any weapon system there is available, and there's lots of them available now for anybody with money, okay? Mm-hmm. Just ask the Bush family, all right? They're the experts in this area. Just ask the Bush family, all right? So, and secondly, you mentioned the declaration by General Janis Karpinski. General Janis Karpinski, who I really appreciate, and obviously she supports me, and was flabbergasted when she found out what was going on with my case. Flabbergasted, Okay. She actually had her star pulled. Okay. It's first time in American history that has ever happened. When the scandal with Abu Ghraib broke, okay, that's why I say I don't need any more support. I have plenty of support. History supports my case entirely. All right. But when it broke, she stated to me, they called her into a room and said, how could this happen? Blah, blah, blah. And she said, well, obviously I wasn't being informed of everything that was going on because I didn't have access to my own command areas. And they said, okay, fine, we're going to take a break. This is how they do things officially. We're going to take a, quote, a break. And she said, I don't need a break. And they said, yes, we think you look like you need a break. And they turned right around and came back 15 minutes later and said, we've decided what we're going to do here. And she said, yes. And we are going to reduce you in rank back to colonel. And then they got up and walked out before she could say anything. All right. That's how this was dealt with. Okay. And that's why she has been such a firm supporter, strong supporter in my case. Because if she had known what I was sending in my reports and the charges that I had made, America would never have been subjected to the embarrassment and humiliation of these war crimes. Do you think anybody wants to invite us back now anywhere in the world? Okay, because of what happened the first time around in Iraq? Hell no, they don't. They're not stupid. The world's not stupid. The last thing they need is a bunch of jokers that showed up the first time around and managed to take a sure victory. They managed to snatch, how do they say it? Snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. Okay, I mean, the longest running ground war in existence, and we almost managed to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. Within the first 3 weeks we were there, we had the place. People were thanking us in Iraq, and look at the way we ended up with a tail between our legs, just glad to get out of there in one piece. Okay, so that's why I'm so irritated. And people aren't sure why I'm doing what I'm doing. That is exactly it. 12,000 dead later, billions and billions of dollars wasted, and here we are about to go do it again. All right? Here we are about to go make the same mistake again, except we got a really tough customer now, okay, that wants us. I mean, you can watch them every night on TV. Hey, they're calling for us to come back. Sure, let's finish this thing up, okay? I'll tell you what, if we take them up on that invitation, we have had it, all right? They do have weapons of mass destruction in their possession. They know how to use those weapons of mass destruction. They will use those weapons of mass destruction. So they're just saying, please come back, America.
No, absolutely. And like I said at the top of the show, I mean, it's the same kind of game that's being played all over the place. We're inviting ourselves into situations by creating them, it seems like, because look, the weapons of mass destruction, we invited ourselves into that situation, didn't we? Wreaking further havoc with these populations by, defying the Geneva Convention. Of course, people have their comments about that or whatever. But I mean, the simple act of torture in and of itself is one of those things that's just completely counterproductive. And anybody can join in, like I said before, if you're on my Skype list, go ahead and just call in and I'll join you into the conversation. 718-717-8296. Not sure if the phone line is working. I think it is. But then again, I'm not seeing anybody call. Except I do have Barry on the line. Barry, how you doing?
Good, Chuck. How are you doing? How are you doing there, Mr. Ford? I've been listening in for the last little while, and I like a lot of things you're saying. One of the things I was going to ask you one question, Mr. Ford, before I ask the question I was going to ask you is, have you looked much into EMPs, and is the U.S. military paying much attention to the threat of EMPs in North America, and are you aware of the threat? And have you looked into that yourself at all? I know I'm getting a little off subject here, but it's something I wanted to ask you.
Okay. I'm sorry, Chuck. The reception on this end is real static filled.
It's okay.
Can you translate what he just said?
Sure. He was asking He was
Right.
asking if EMPs. Have you looked into the threat that comes from electromagnetic pulses and things like that, and how the military is dealing with that threat to the U.S. in general?
Okay, I think I mentioned this on your show before. One of the issues that I had to report to the FBI was something we found at the Alacaca facility, which shouldn't have been there. Okay, I'll be the first to say it should not have been there. All right, these were nuclear detonators. Okay, nuclear detonators. Now, and if you type in nuclear pits, PITS, you will see what I saw. Okay, at the Alacaca facility. Now, EMP, of course, is a direct result of any kind of nuclear detonation. All right, that's why if you look at like Russian radio trucks and so forth, they still operate on gas tubes, to avoid the possibility of any kind of nuclear use on the battlefield, which stops IC circuits, integrated circuits. Okay, now that's not my area. It's not my expertise. It took me 3 years and finally communicating with the engineer who designed those nuclear pits that I saw in Iraq. Okay, I saw in Iraq, which those nuclear pits, by the way, are either probably in Syria or in the hands of ISIS. Now, if a nuclear pit with a 2.5 kilogram fissile material nuclear pit is detonated, you will see EMP issues. Okay.
Right.
Now, like I said, I'm not an expert in this area at all. Okay, but I did speak to the engineer who designed those systems. They were designed in Los Alamos, New Mexico. All right, and you can be assured that even a small 2.5 kilogram detonating core like that doesn't need a whole fissile pile to produce EMP. But as I said, the most fearsome thing that we are facing right now is ISIS probably has those pits.
Correct.
And
Correct.
okay, I'm not speaking Chinese here. ISIS probably has those pits, and it doesn't take a nuclear physicist to figure out how to time those things and detonate those pits.
Right. And this is one of the things, just to clarify for the listeners, this is one of the things that you literally saw in the bunker along with the VX materials that were created, right?
Well, actually, I saw those pits at another facility, as I said, the Alacaca facility, which was the largest facility of weapons ordnance of its kind in the world. Okay, it was about 300 acres. Okay.
Right.
So I saw about 15 of these nuclear pits stacked in one of the bunkers. As I rushed in, I was too busy looking for tripwires, like booby traps and things like that, to really pay attention. But I saw one of these pits the box had been torn open and it was sitting on top of the rest of the boxes. And I thought, that's an odd-looking thing. It was 4 rods with it looked like a softball of metal and a digital package in front of it. Okay, I thought, what is that? And it wasn't until I spoke to an engineer, a nuclear engineer, who said, "Oh my God, where did you see that?" And I said, in a storage depot in Iraq. He said, "Let me tell you how those came down. The order for the purchase and engineering design, and who else? And I'll tell this to Barry. Who else would be responsible for something like this? But Dick Cheney. Dick Cheney is responsible for you possibly seeing the results of EMP on the battlefield."
The reason I asked Mr. Ford is I have done quite a bit of research into the subject here in the last couple of weeks. I actually broke 5 or 6 hours into it now, and I've really looked deeply into it. The effect of an EMP in America. Basically, the soft underbelly of the United States of America right now is their power grid. And I did some in-depth study on how they make these weapons and how easy it would be to make one. And in light of the fact that America has made a lot of friends overseas here in the last 10 years, it wouldn't take a lot to attack the soft underbelly of the United States of America. I believe it's a real threat to us, and I just wondered if you'd look into it. I wondered if the American government was. But
Well,
you said that's not your field of expertise, but it is a disturbing issue, to say the least.
absolutely. And here's what I want to tag on to that is that, this is what he saw. There are potentially a whole lot more of those things floating around. Okay.
Exactly. Exactly.
The potential for this stuff, once you start to put this out into the world, you have no idea necessarily where it's going to go. I mean, some people do for some of the time, but after a while, regimes fall, people that are guarding things die, and
Yeah.
and this stuff gets moved around, man. We find things, resurfacing later, just like nobody's ever accounted for huge sections of the smaller weapons that the former Soviet Union had. These things are out there somewhere. I doubt they are just buried in a sand dune. Okay.
Mhm.
So you never know where they could end up, and of course, this is one of the things that I hate to even kind of feed into, because the mainstream every once in a while will tell you, well, we may have a dirty bomb situation on our hands at any moment. But the reality is that once this stuff is unleashed into the world, you don't know exactly where it's going to end up. So I mean, the possibility of that, disturbing the electrical grid in the United States or some other strategic location is at the very least a
Enormous.
possibility that is formidable. Okay. So
Yeah.
sorry, I just wanted to add that on there.
Okay. I was going to say, unfortunately, I'd love to be able to hear Barry, but it's really garbled on my end. But I'd like to say this is that there's a lot of people that are now listening to what I say, and as in the last 2 weeks, I was informed that they are moving the atomic clock that shows where we are in terms of nuclear threat and the possibility of threat. I was told that they're moving the hands of the clock to 12 o'clock straight up. So that means that anytime this, what Barry is describing could possibly happen. All right.
I'll add one thing to that, Charles. It is a fact right now that Russia is moving most of the strategic information, people, et cetera, into bunkers. They're preparing them. This is documented and happening right now as we talk. We see the whole world ramping up right now for war. So it's kind of a scary place we live in right now, guys.
No, absolutely. That's one of the things that is going on. Of course, it's being portrayed as merely a Soviet threat. That there was all of this shuffling and possibilities of them getting aggressive. But the reality is that I think that there's more than one country preparing themselves for the possibilities, because bigger things are on their way down the road, and it's a very frightening situation, regarding this stuff. So, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I saw something very interesting, and Barry might appreciate this. I found, okay, it was a Russian radio truck, okay, and it had, and the reason I know that they have gas tubes to prevent against EMP was that something had happened to this truck, and I've described it on your show before, but it's hard to describe. Okay, something had happened to this truck. It wasn't exploded. All the glass tubes were not fractured. Okay, none of them were fractured, and this truck had literally melted into a great big lake of metal, a molten metal. Okay, I'd say that this pond was actually of molten metal was maybe 30 feet across, but something had melted that truck from above it. Okay, something had aimed at that truck and melted that truck. I mean, it didn't burn the tires off. The tires were just in crumbles. Okay, all metal on the truck was molten metal. Okay, it dripped off like it looked like a Salvador Dali, painting. Okay, and then a little bit later, we'd come by a village, and one day we came by the village, and there was a what was called a MiG-29. Okay, if you know what that is, Barry. Okay, a MiG-29, and it was fully armed to the teeth. Okay, it had SRAMs, it had surface to airs, it air to surface. It had heat missiles on it. It had everything, including a gun. Well, we made note of it, where it was. It was state of the art. Okay, it was parked up against a mud brick wall, being hidden from our satellites, basically, is what it was. Okay, and everybody was friendly in the village. Everybody thought we were pretty good guys. Okay, and then we made note of it, and we got a request to come back and see it. 2 days later, and with more details, we came back. I noticed that the entire village was behind closed doors. Nobody came out to greet us this time. Something had happened, and that entire, and when we turned the corner of the mud brick wall, there was something that had happened to that jet. Okay, it wasn't exploded. It was the same thing that happened to that Russian truck. It was melted. Okay, I don't know how to describe it any other way. It was melted from above. Something melted that jet, with twin titanium engines. Okay, every bit of avionics on that craft was melted into a great big pool of metal, just like the Russian truck.
Yeah, I know we're getting close to the end of the show here, but I'll just pipe in real quick on that, Mr. Ford.
Mm-hmm.
It's too bad we don't have Charles, we don't have Larry on here right now. Larry Woods, you've had him on a couple times, incredible guy. But he actually was referencing exactly to what the Mr. Ford was talking about the other day. I was having a conversation with him. That the military, the U.S. military has toys put away, I believe, Mr. Ford, that are far advanced from what we actually know they have. And a frequency weapon, what you're describing right now, everything in our universe is made with a vibration. And some of the research on frequency weapons, I'm sure you're aware of it, but that has the possibility to actually take your metal and turn it into a pool of lava. Just wanted to pipe in on that, Charles, because it's something Larry was actually talking to me about it the other day, and it's funny that the general is talking about, or Mr. Ford is talking about that. I just wanted to add that into the conversation there, but go ahead.
Right, and he's just speaking about his own experiences, what he's seen. Of course, we've heard lots of these stories, and Larry Woods is somebody that I would like to get on again, because he could probably explain exactly how that's done. That's the thing about Larry. Amazing guy, extremely intelligent. It's so hard to get him kind of condensed into one little show with me, but I try. And absolutely. And this is the thing. The weaponry is advanced. The information that has gone out about our involvement in these events has definitely been restricted at best. And and of course, this is why I'm bringing to you this story. And we are just about out of time. Down to just about the last minute and a half, I think, Mr. Ford. I don't know if there's the last thing you want to get out there. Well, but I do want to thank everybody who tuned in tonight, and Barry Prince, of course, who is the host of The Big Puzzle. Take a look at that. I got it right again, Barry. But I'm going to give Mr. Ford the last word here, and then we're going to be all done for the night, guys. So I want to thank everybody who tuned in, and Barry, I'm going to hang up on you, but I'll be talking to you soon, buddy. Thank you.
Thanks, Charles.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Barry. Yeah.
So go ahead.
I'm going to say the one thing for the one person who called who sent something into your chat room and said, hey, what about Mr. Ford? There, somebody saying this about him. I'd like to reference a case, okay, that was global and international in the implications of an intelligence agent finding out something, knowing something, and then how the Bush administration dealt with them. And in comparison to my case, how they dealt with me, my case pales in comparison. And that is, and I want everybody that's listening to look up the case of Valerie Plame, Plame, Valerie Plame. All right, okay. I had a nice conversation with she and her husband, and they informed me. They said something like this: is that
Stop